traditional politics is very good at half dealing with problems, and the problems we're facing can't be dealt with by half measures. So resilient communities are going to be really, really important, I think, in the coming years. And the capacity of communities to come up with answers that the central policy makers can't or won't. I think the hopeful sign is that the wonderful things that are happening in communities, often communities at the margins rather than communities, the exciting things that are happening in communities at the margins of the people who are saying global economic systems failed us, so let's establish our own economic system, our local currency system, or whatever. The people who are trying to redevelop a notion of community cultural engagement so that we stop being the mass consumer culture and actually start producing culture ourselves again through community cultural development. Yeah, I think some very exciting things are happening on the ground. The level of awareness about climate change in the community is greater than it is in Canberra. I think that's clear. And so if we're to deal with those sorts of problems effectively, vibrant, resilient, strong communities and community action is going to be what's important. As that wonderful quote from Studs Terkel, where he says, "Hope has never trickled down; it only springs up." And I think that's a really important thing to remember. And that another quote I like very much, W.H. Auden, a poet, when his great poem, The Beginning of the Second World War. And at one stage in that poem, he says, he's looking at the world, it's about to get plunged into war, and it's a pretty despairing place. And he says, "Defenceless under the night, our world in stupor lies. Yet, dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages." I think that's a really powerful idea. The ironic points of light that flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. I think what we're on about is the just exchanging their messages, because the world looks a pretty devastating place right at the moment in many ways. And yet you can see the ironic points of light flashing out in all sorts of interesting and unlikely ways, which I think gives us hope for community and community development, and says that what we're doing is actually pretty damn important. And if we think about human rights, what we're doing at community level is ultimately what will protect and realise people's rights, rather than all the treaties that we're having. I don't think in terms of legal processes and requirements it matters particularly whether Australia has a Bill of Rights or whether it doesn't. But I think it matters symbolically that Australia has a Bill of Rights. And if symbolically Australia has a Bill of Rights, that can help to add to a culture of human rights. I've talked for long enough, so perhaps we could stop. I could stop there, and we can have some questions or argument or disagreements or ideas that people might have from what I was saying. Over to you.
I just wanted to ask, when you sit down to write a book, it seems to me like a really daunting task to undertake. How do you approach that? Like, is it chapter by chapter, or is it like a essay by essay, or?
Look, the books I've done have all started with the big idea, and so you think about the whole thing as a whole, and then get terribly daunted by it, then start to think further within it. And I think, as I think about this one I've just finished, actually I found it a bit tedious to write it, because the things that are in it I'd already actually done in various conference papers or lectures or something like that. But I could see how it all fitted together, and I should have thought that's the same. So, but what I've found when I've written books is that they've never come out the way I thought they were going to. you may have had the same experience writing essays. You start thinking you're doing, but the very process of writing helps you to think things through, and you start to think of things in different ways. And think, oh, shit. And sometimes you end up arguing almost the reverse of what you thought you were. That's why I said books are works in progress, ideas in progress. And it's a bit daunting when they come up. Don't really want to open that now. Because as I said already, there's things I want to do differently. Yeah.
How do you feel about making your books available electronically, in alternative formats?
Yeah.
Because publishers and universities and other institutions seem to fight this, and lots of obstacles, including electronic ones, in the way.
Yeah. I'm really happy for them. I think ideas should be circulated as widely as possible. And the term intellectual property I regard as nonsense, because it makes no sense, really. Because ideas, you take ideas from other places and you recycle them and you get them out. Ideas circulate. The very idea of intellectual property strikes me as incredible arrogance. So I'm really in favour of the general spread of ideas. On the other hand, I am aware that I'm in the lucky position of having had my salary from elsewhere, and therefore any money I make out of books is kind of separate, and if the money doesn't come to me, it doesn't matter very much. But for people whose actual work is writing and creating, for them, they must have a different view of intellectual property, because it's their livelihood. So my own personal view is the wider ideas are available, the better. And if people want to do things electronically or whatever, I mean, I'm too old for the electronic revolution to know how to do all those things. But if that's the way it works, then great as far as I'm concerned. But of course, with something like the book, copyrights now with the publishers.
You could change your mind a lot faster.
Yeah, true.
Incorporate.
And we all do. We do that now, don't we? I mean, think of the email, the power of emails. I was aware of, just as an example, I was aware of that at the time of the Northern Territory intervention, when the government did that dreadful stuff in the Northern Territory. I wrote a piece that I tried to get published in the Australian as an opinion piece about why what they were doing actually broke all community development principles. It didn't get published, as often these things don't. But, you know, I sent it to a couple of people who I thought might be interested, who sent it on to a couple of other people who sent it on. But before I knew where it was, the thing had gone all over Australia. I had people saying, look, can I print it out for my students? We'd really like to talk about what you... And I sort of realised, well, actually, it didn't matter that it didn't get to the Australian, because it got to all sorts of places anyway. A number of Indigenous people saw it and commented on it. And so we've actually got ways of subverting those dominant forms of publication anyway, and let's use them. I'm not very good at it. Don't know how to blog and things like that, but I think most people do now, and I think that's great, you know, that we've got that capacity to interchange ideas with each other.